I hope you'll give me permission to talk for a few minutes this morning about where we are as a country. You know, we're coming together just a stone's throw from here. This country is gridlocked. We're gridlocked in many of your state capitals. Many of our communities are gridlocked. All that we hear in this country right now is what we're against. We don't hear a lot about what we're for, about what we need to do to create the kind of society we want, about how we need to bring people together to do the things that will help us move us forward as opposed to stopping us dead in our tracks. You know, I remember the lab where all these folks, the Public Innovators Lab that we did in Chicago with AARP leaders and lead volunteers. And the spirit and the sense in that room is so different than what we're hearing in politics and public life today. It reminded me of Ethel Percy Andrus and her saying, we are here to serve, not to be served. We are here to serve, not to be served. And so this morning what I'd like to talk about is, where are we as a country? What are the conditions today? Why is it that America needs AARP now more than ever before, and particularly with the new strategy that you're pursuing? And what will it require from each of us as leaders, to create the kind of change and impact that we want in this country right now? You know, recently my 21-year-old daughter and I, Emily, went to Germany to visit the Nazi death camp Dachau. And we spent the day there going through the death camp. And when Emily and I went back to Munich that night and we were having dinner, I looked at her and I said, you know, Emily, there's still something drawing me to this camp. There's still some unanswered questions I have. I still have some unfinished business to do. And my daughter, 21-year-old daughter, turned to me and gave her dad the greatest gift a daughter could ever give. She said, Dad, let's forget about our plans for tomorrow. Don't worry about me. You should go back to Dachau tomorrow morning by yourself and do what you need to do and come back whenever you're ready. And so I woke up at 5:30 the next morning and got on a train from Munich to Dachau. And I got at the camp at 7 a.m. My understanding was that it didn't open until 9 a.m. And I thought I would sit there and think and write in my journal and contemplate what I was about to experience. But there was something in me that caused me to go up to the gate of the camp. The same gate that the prisoners were taken off the train and the train cars and brought through. And the gate was shut, and I just gently pushed it. And it opened. It opened. And so I walked through the gate, and I was the only soul in that entire death camp, for as far as I could see. And I walked to the courtyard, which is about 3 or 4 football fields big, vast. And I went to the middle of the courtyard, the same courtyard that the prisoners were brought every morning for roll call and every evening to account for themselves. And as I stood in that courtyard and said my Hebrew prayers and tears were flowing down my face, it was a stark reminder that in this world indifference does exist, that apathy can sometimes get the best of us, that sometimes we turn away from one another when we are in need, that sometimes we even hide from one another. Sometimes we even hide from one another. And so after standing there for about an hour, just by myself, not a soul in sight, I decided to walk back towards the north wall, toward the crematory and the gas chamber. And as I was walking back toward the north wall, I saw an opening that hadn't been there the day before. And so I walked toward it. And as I came up to it and walked through that door, I found myself in another courtyard, a courtyard about as large as this room. And what I found there was a monastery started by the Sisters of Carmel in the mid-1960s. And as I stood in that courtyard, I turned to my left and I saw a glass enclosed case with vestments made of the tattered clothes of the prisoners. And as I turned to my right, I saw another door. And so I walked from one end of the courtyard to the other. And I pushed that door open. And I found a small one-room chapel, a Catholic chapel. And so I walked into that chapel and I sat down and prayed for another 20 minutes. And when I came out of the chapel, I looked to the other side of the courtyard and I saw yet another door. But this time there was a window next to it. And so I went over to that door and to the window and I peered inside. And looking back at me was a sister in her habit. A sister in her habit, and she came around and opened the door. And I went through and sat with her for about an hour, talking with her. When I walked back from that courtyard back into the death camp, on my way back to the crematory and the gas chamber, I was reminded also that there is power in people stepping forward to make a difference, that redemption is possible, and that there is innate goodness in each of us. The question is, will we activate it? And what will we do to activate it? What will we do to activate it? You know, in the U.S. we don't face, obviously, a Holocaust, but we face tough times. We're facing the greatest recession since the 1930s that this country has faced. Our politics are toxic. There's too much acrimony and divisiveness in this country. We keep talking, as I mentioned before, about what we're against, but we seldom talk about what we're for. As I talk to Americans across the country, there are very few leaders, if any, that people trust. In a recent study we're doing right now, I ask people, who do you trust? And you know the one leader that comes up? Oprah. Oprah. And God bless her, we need her. But I don't think we're going to deal with the kinds of challenges on Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and health care reform and other issues that we face in this country unless we have more leaders that we trust. There are very few organizations people tell me that they trust. Most of us, most organizations, I'm told, seem to be more concerned about their own survival, their own good than the common good, And yet, as I travel across this great country of ours, what I keep hearing and what I keep feeling, I suspect you feel this too, is a deep yearning among Americans. A yearning to re-engage and reconnect in public life. A yearning to come back into the public square. A yearning to be part of something larger than just ourselves. A yearning to join hands and lock arms and make a difference. Not just for our own good, but for the common good. And it seems to me, and the reason why I'm here this morning, and the reason why we've been working with AARP, is because I believe you're uniquely positioned in this country right now. You have millions of members across the country who trust you, and they touch millions more who trust them. And through these individuals, we can activate people to come together and work for the common good, not just our own good. AARP is uniquely positioned to do this in the country. But you and I both know, we've been following politics and public life long enough and community life in this country, that there's nothing automatic. Just because we say it, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. Just because we wish for a better public life doesn't mean it's going to come to be. Just because we want people to focus on the common good and not just their own individual good does not mean that we will be able to transcend our self-interest. It doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen automatically. And so those of us who want to make our work relevant and significant in the lives of communities have to answer a fundamental question that I think Americans are asking themselves and each other today. And it's a question I hear across the country. And it's a simple question. Most of what I'm going to talk about is pretty simple and basic this morning, because I think the basics are the things we need to get right if we want to build the right kind of society. And the basic question is this: who can I trust? Who can I trust? Who can I trust to bring people together into safe spaces so that we can have a conversation without all the finger pointing and blame placing that takes place in this country? Who can I trust? Who can I trust to put issues on the public agenda that reflect my concerns in my daily lives? The single mom who has 2 children who knows she's sending them to an inadequate public school every morning. Who can she trust? The shut-in senior citizen who's by themselves without any help. Who can they trust? Who can we trust to create impact in our lives that will make a real difference? Not the kind of difference that we often have in our annual reports and on our websites, where we tout our successes, but which don't touch people's lives. Who can people trust? Who can people trust to bring them together as volunteers, not to do nice volunteer work, but to do the necessary work in our communities so that we can create better communities and a better society, and that help us do things that are meaningful, not make work.